If you're watching this on the day that this goes out, it is, of course, the Battle of Britain Day, the 15th of September 1940, in which the Germans put in their largest force of the Luftwaffe, the bombers and the fighters, to try and knock out the plucky RAF in a last bid attempt so that they could start Operation Sea Lion and invade England during the Second World War. It failed because we, the British, managed to send up our fighters and all the supporters in the radar stations, or the, radio direction finding towers, the chain home towers. We were able, fortunately, thank goodness, to be able to quell the onslaught from the Germans during that time. And as a result of that, Hitler turned round and thought this is not going to work. He wanted to turn his attention to other things, such as the invasion of Russia. So we managed at that point to sort it out. But in a sense of, Hitler also turned his attention to blasting our morale, as it were, and then we went into the Blitz. But we remember this day, the 15th of September, as the sort of the end of the Battle of Britain. It had been going on for a month or two. The skies full of vapour trails and spiralling aircraft, dogfights, and raining down bullets. So you had to make sure you didn't get anything if you're looking up and they're overhead. The bullets are flying. Of course, the cartridges and the bullets are all flying out of the aircraft, so you could easily get brained yourself if you weren't too careful. So yes, the Battle of Britain, a fantastic event. The film, of course, the 1960s film, is a brilliant interpretation of that. And I certainly recommend. It's one of those sort of things I watch from time to time. It makes me very proud to be British and indeed English when you think about the incredible innovations that went on during the Battle of Britain and the whole Second World War, that rush in which great brains, but not just in Britain, of course, Germany was coming up with great brains in order to defeat us. But it made me think, as it's a time of remembrance of battles, the battles that we have in our personal life. We all have battles with things, perhaps not quite so dramatic as getting rid of a foe that's coming in, but you may have had personal fights with different people, whether they were neighbours. I've had an ongoing personal fight, not fisticuffs of stuff as such, but I had issues with a woman who parks down the road from me, her car, and I live in a terraced house on a street of a parade of terrace. There's about 12 or 13 of these houses in a row. We all park behind our house in a little private lane. Not private because it's barricaded off and one of these sort of. It's not owned by the council. It's a sort of a bit of a no man's land, really. In fact, it's owned by a supermarket who's given it over to the houses so they can park their cars behind it. And it's a sort of unwritten thing that you would park your car immediately behind your house. Why would you park it in other places? Because other people coming to park would go, hang on a minute, where shall I put my car? Anyway, there happened to be a woman who would park her car willy-nilly wherever she liked. And so it would block your space, and everyone's parking behind their house, and you go, well, now I can't park, because somebody had parked in her space, so she would shove it in your space. And even if you said, look, do you mind, I'd rather you didn't park in my space, her argument, I'll park wherever I damn well like. And she was the most obnoxious person I've ever met, to be honest with you. Really, really difficult to talk to or persuade or even have a gentle, couldn't even say good day to. But not only would she just park her car there overnight, shall we say, until the next day and then move it, which would be, you could tolerate that because, at least you'd be gone in the morning. She would leave it there for a week. So it would be there for a whole week. And you couldn't, and then, what do? I don't want to then go and park in somebody else's space. Anyway, this raged on for some time, involving at one point a point where, in the end, I blocked her in and she got the police, and the police came round a few weeks later and they said, look, we can't do anything because it's a private lane. but we'd rather you didn't. And I said, well, I won't block her in if she doesn't park in my space. So this was an ongoing battle. I'm pleased to say that over the recent weeks, I've been aware that I've not seen her vehicle at all. And I'm not sure if she actually lives there, or if she does, she's got rid of her car. Anyway, it's a battle that I'm hoping, and I can't as yet say that I have, that it's been won. But we all have other battles, don't we? It might be just the battle of motivation. The battle to get off our backsides and get on with things. Those things that we often think, oh, I must do the roof. There's a hole in the roof, and before the winter comes, I must get up there and cement it up. Or I must get those windows fixed. Or I must hang some curtains over there. And we often put things off. And sometimes it's just a battle in the mind. Perhaps we're battling our partners over certain things. It may be relationships are falling apart, and we're battling over the custody of the children or the custody of the house, or you're just arguing about who's going to take the car today for work. Well, I took it last time. We're always battling against the lack of income, or the lack of money, or the things that we want. And so I just wondered, what do you battle against? What battles have you won, and what battles are ongoing that you're desperately trying to sort out? Whether, as I say, it's just minor domestic things or more major things. I had a 4-year contracted battle, which I lost in the end, with my eye, with an amoeba, a tiny little amoeba that was in the cornea of my eye. And over 4 years, it kept eating the cornea away. No matter how much bleach I could put in, I could only put in a certain amount of bleach without guaranteeing that I would actually go blind. So there was this sort of weird battle that I had, along with Moorfields Eye Hospital and a very lovely chap, the surgeon there, Dr. Dart, who was my consultant, and we were desperately fighting this amoeba that was a acanthamoeba that was in my eye. And it resulted in 3 cornea transplants, and then eventually the removal of the eye and an artificial eye going in, which is what I have, sadly. And of course, in the end, I've got so used to it now, I barely think about it. But would I like to have had that battle in the first place? No, not really. Although it did, sometimes battles do you favours. You think, adversity, you go down one track. It forced me. I was an entertainer at the time. Well, I hope I'm still entertaining in some form or another. But I was an entertainer, juggling and unicycling and fire eating and doing a lot on the corporate circuit. And sometimes, you felt that you were turning up at places and people didn't really want you there. And that was a battle in itself. They would book you at, say, a certain time. You'd turn up and they would say, oh, well, you can't park here. And you go, well, hang on a minute. I've just spent 3 hours in the car coming. Where do you want me to? Well, I don't know, mate. You'll have to park down the road. Okay, fine. Now I need to change into my costume and bring in my props. Well, we haven't got any changing rooms. It's like, well, you want me, but you don't want me. You're not really being very helpful. You want me to perform over here, but you've not allocated a car space. You've not made it easy for me. And you're doing all these battles. And then at the end of it, you get changed and you sort out all of that. And then you've got to be Mr. Hey, I'm Mr. Entertainer and everything's fine. Those people who battle on stage, battle on anyway, even though they may be feeling ill, they may have had a death in the family or some very bad news, and the show must go on, But in my case, of course, when I lost the eye, it meant that I could no longer do a lot of that work. The eye went really nasty and it was quite grim. And for a long period of time, a protracted period, the other eye was in sympathy. And so this eye could barely stand any daylight whatsoever. So I lived in a perpetual darkness for about 2 years with the curtains drawn. And I changed my profession. I was doing a little bit of corporate video work, and I did more of that because I could be behind the camera instead of front of the camera. And it forced my profession to go down a different path. And then after that, I started to get into the YouTube stuff when the eye was a little bit better. And I could actually present, and I got used to seeing myself with an artificial eye and not actually sort of going, oh my God, I'm the most ugliest bloke in the world. Look at me. It's terrible. as indeed I did feel, and sometimes still do, of course, because it's not my true I. We all battle with weight, don't we? Well, I say all of us, whether that's losing weight too quickly or, of course, gaining weight. And these are battles that often we know what the answer is. We know what we should be doing. We know we should be eating better foods, and we know that we should be taking more exercise or reducing our amount of alcohol that we have. And it's a battle, or is it motivation, or is it desire? But it is a battle. Some people battle harder with that. Habits, bad habits, habits that you know that you shouldn't have. Sometimes that is a battle that you struggle with. You think, I don't want to be doing this, whatever the habit is, whether it's smoking or drinking or, I don't know, whatever it is, the habit it might be. And you're fighting against your own, your will. Go on, just one more cigarette, it's not going to, one more bar of chocolate, it's not going to hurt. He's like, no, I don't want to do it. And we have to be incredibly strong-willed in those battles. Sometimes, I had a battle against, another battle I had was a parking ticket. I parked my car when I went to see my son, and within 2 minutes of my arrival, I had a ticket. And I saw on the ticket the time of arrival, and then the ticket said when it was ticketed, and it was 2 minutes. And I thought, but this is ridiculous. If I didn't have time to go to the sign, to read the sign, to see what I had to do and get a ticket out of the machine and put it on the car and what have you. And I knew then that I was in the right, because 2 minutes is just, not enough time. And I thought a magistrate is going to turn around and say, this is unreasonable. But then, of course, you get all the letters with the black heading, we're taking you to court if you don't pay, it's this, and it's now escalated up to £500 if you don't pay. We'll knock off £100 if you pay today. All this kind of stuff. It went on for 4 years, this business with this ticket thing. And I said, I'm just not going to pay it. I am not going to pay it because I believe it's unreasonable. Take me to court. And in the end, they did take me to court. And I had all this paperwork, and it was all this sort of very made to make you feel really small, and we are the big people, and you are never going to win. And even when I got to the magistrate's court and I had my day in court, the person who was representing the parking firm came up to me as I was waiting before I'd gone in and said, look, you know what? You're not going to win. We are going to win. And it's going to cost you this much money. We can come to an arrangement. If you just give us a couple of £100 today, here's a form. We can put it in and the case will be dropped and it's no problem. And I said, look, no, I've waited 4 years. I've got my day in court. I don't care now. I really don't care. If I lose, fair enough. But I don't think I will, because I just think this is unreasonable. You've done it for 2 minutes. You didn't allow me. Surely you, as an individual, as a person, as a human being, can see that 2 minutes is not enough time to go and read the sign and get the ticket out the machine and put it on your car. Clearly the bloke was just too keen to put a ticket on my vehicle. And they said, well, we don't think you're going to win. Well, it went in front of the magistrate, and I'm very pleased to say that the magistrate said, this is unreasonable. And I thought, yes, I'm vindicated. And of course, they had to bear all the costs, not me. So sometimes standing up for yourself, these battles are often worth fighting. Not all of them, of course, we can fight, but it is worthy of getting up and giving it a go, having the plucky spirit and saying, do you know what? I may get knocked down at the end, but I may survive. It's got to be worth it. I think I was reading a book about the evacuation of Dunkirk during the Second World War that preceded the Battle of Britain Day. Sometimes it was actually a book about the Battle of Britain, but it was setting the scene. How a number of the British troops were being evacuated after the invasion of France to try and repel the German forces in 1940, whenever it was, a sort of May-June time. And unfortunately, they were overwhelmed by the might of Germany, and they all came back, and as you know, they were all on the beaches. But there were some units that were in the towns of Dieppe trying to hold the forces back. And the sergeants of those army forces knew that they had to release a certain number of troops to get to the beaches, and they'd take their chances. And then a number of their team, or their group, their squad, whatever you call it, I'm not a soldier, so I don't know how it works, knew that they would not be coming back. but they had to fight the Germans to the end. And those situations must have been they just knew but their job was to hold the Germans back for as long as possible in order to save other people. And you cannot imagine what that must have been like, the feelings that were going through those people's minds as they knew, we're not coming back, we're going to be killed in order to save these others. And it's a gulp moment. And what do? You stand up to it, and it's a battle worth fighting, even though you know you're going to lose. I want to know, what battles have you had? Those good battles and even the bad battles. Let me know in the comments. I'd be fascinated to read them, and we will, of course, read some out. On that note, let's have a look at what your recent comments were about queuing. I was talking about queuing because yesterday was the beginning of the queuing. That is, I don't know exactly what somebody said, something like 30 hours or something in order to get in the queue and come round to see the coffin of the Queen lying in state. Louise Lage says, I avoid queues at all costs. If I see a queue, I go somewhere else or try another day or time. I can't for the life of me understand how anyone can stand in the queue for a day and a half only to spend 10 seconds looking at a coffin when all that can be observed and respectively honoured quietly from one's home. Exactly. I do agree with you, but some people just feel they've got to be there. And I guess there's a sense of battling through the queues, isn't there, as well in that. And I don't know what motivates people to do that. I have to say, good luck to them. I couldn't do it myself. New Start says, the more hours that pass, the more is worrying, coming to light that people are almost being forced to mourn by the establishment and alike. This is not North Korea, is it, for goodness sake? As I've mentioned before, if people want to mourn, let them mourn. If people do not want to mourn, let them get on with their day. I have a genuine question, if I may. If all you folks that are going to mourn or go to London and mourn a 96-year-old lady that has been spoon-fed best quality food on a daily basis for the past of her life and has unlimited wealth beyond belief for the best part of her life and needed for nothing for the best part of her life, and being bold now, he says, also guessing that in most circumstances you've never met her in your life. So I'm puzzled to know what Elizabeth has actually done over the years to personally impact or improve your family life enough to mourn somebody that you don't really know. Over to you, he says. And that's an interesting question, of course, except that, I have actually met the Queen. I shook hands with the Queen. It was a very humbling moment, even though I was dressed as an overgrown schoolboy at the time, and I did speak back to the Queen, not in my true voice, but as an actor performing as yes, Your Majesty. Oh, of course, Your Majesty. And that really happened. However, even if you've met her or you didn't meet her, she was the head of the state. She has brought to this country unknown. I don't think you can measure it. Prestige, wealth, a sense of pride. I'm guessing you don't get these things, and that's absolutely fine if you don't get them, but I think a lot of people will have thought of it's something that they couldn't do themselves. They may not want to do it, but having somebody who is representing this nation for 70 years and going around and yes, being spoon-fed and being born into it. But remember, at the same time, the sacrifices that this woman was unable to just go down into the street, go down to the pub and have an ordinary pub life, continually had to have bodyguards, was basically trapped in a bubble. So it's easy to say that, they were spoon-fed the best foods and they had all this and they've got all this wealth and all the rest of it, except that they're limited and their ability to speak freely that you and I have, they didn't have. The ability to walk down the road unrecognised and go into a fast food restaurant, they didn't have. The freedom to have an affair that nobody knew about and get on buses and go down here and do that, they didn't have. The sacrifice that somebody makes in that position is immense. And then at the same time they're making those sacrifices, they're working for the good of the country. There are two sides to that argument that you say. And I don't think you've given the other side of the argument, at least. I mean, on the one hand, it'd be lovely to have all those things, but to be trapped in the bubble, that's why, even with what I do on YouTube, I can walk down to my locality and occasionally people will say, "Oh, Richard, I love your channel and I've seen you," and all the rest of it. If I was internationally famous, I couldn't do that. And that's the worry. If the channel grew to the point that and it won't, so I have no fear on that. But if it grew to the point that it was ridiculous, I became ridiculously famous, I too would, like so many film stars, end up in this bubble, being fed what other people want me to feed me, and my freedoms would be completely curtailed. So I don't think your argument is that you're saying, why do we mourn her, and all of that. It's the service and the pride and a whole load of things which clearly has gone over your head or you've not thought about. No disrespect whatsoever. Shirley Lynch says, I'm not a lover of queues. With regard to queuing for the Queen, we just watched the thousands on the TV and shed a tears for those who have cried. I envy those who can stand in queues. Yes, I mean, I'm not a lover of queues. Heidi Cash says, no, sick of queues. I just wouldn't do it regardless of what or whom. I mean, sometimes, you just have to queue up for something, don't you? But it does depend on the size, and I think we all make those personal decisions about how long and how difficult that queue is that we will withstand. If it's only 2 or 3 people, you may do it. But if it's 20 minutes or half an hour or 3 hours, sometimes you have no choice if you're coming back from a country and you've got to queue to go through passport control, or, as we said before, the motorways, you have no choice. And those, you have to grin and bear it. But if the choice is yours, of course, it's a different thing. I refuse, says Peter Edwards, to queue at a petrol station. Anthony Conti says, I avoid them. And Steam Searcher says, we were queuing to get into a model engineer exhibition many years ago at Thornbury, and to pass the time, got chatting to the man behind. I have met up with BQ many times over the years and keep in touch on Facebook. Some could say the best queue ever. So, I mean, yes, I guess if you meet up with somebody and you make friends in a queue, then clearly it's been an advantageous situation. Jean Lima says, I hate queuing. It's bad enough getting caught in a queue on the traffic on the M25. Oh, yes, tell me about it. I mean, your heart sinks as soon as you start seeing, oh, here we go. And you sit down. And how many times have you actually thought, do you know what, I should have bought a plastic bottle or something to pee in, because now all of a sudden I need to go to the loo, or drinks and sandwiches and something, to get you through the day, or a book. When you're sat there, it's like, oh, let's get a book and read until you have to move on. Classic Route says they say it will be at least 5 miles long, at least 20 hours, and you have to pay for a ticket. This is the one to go and see the Queen. Sorry, but I avoid queues where I can. But after seeing my mother's coffin at 5 years old, and now my 2 grandchildren, nephew, cousins, and elderly in between years, I will pay my respect from my home to the Queen. And I think, of course, most people will be doing that. John Mono says, hi, Richard. Conversation. It's interaction. This is about conversations that we had. Thank you very much for reminding me. It's interaction between human beings and... it's interaction, and human beings need interactions. When out walking with my wife, and I often say good morning to people, even if we know them or not. Yes, I do that quite a lot, good morning. Sometimes it's interesting when you say that, good morning, and they look at you as if, they're sort of shocked into it, which is quite funny. Some look at you in horror, almost as if you were going to rob them. Yeah, I know. Isn't it funny? I love doing that. I do blame a lot of it on social media, says John. It's almost as though people do not know how to react without having a keyboard in front of them. Yes, so you could walk down the street, couldn't you, and have a keyboard on you that's not actually connected to anything, and you could go, good morning, give them the keyboard and say, if you need to reply, there we go. Thanks very much. good morning. Is there an N in morning? Yes, there's an N in morning. Thank you. High street shops are falling victim to the online shopping. Everything is being dehumanized and getting worse. I remember many years ago the local butcher who would recommend the best way to cook meat if you just bought and have a chat with you. I remember that. You could say, well, what do you do with this? It's brisket. I've never heard of it. How do you cook it? Oh, well, what you do? And then I would do this and then add a little bit of stock on the top and then turn it over, but only for about a minute, and then it's all lovely and fresh and prime, and put a bit of parsley on the top and you'll love it. But these days, it's all wrapped up. You have no idea, do you? So we cook meat. Yes, or visit the ironmonger to buy a paraffin or two 6-inch nails you need. Yes, back in those days, people actually spoke to you and could advise you, and days have gone of those. Ed Sage, lovely Ed Sage, who lent us the boat when we went on our boat, says, fantastic wag of the chin, Richard. Thank you very much. This is talking to strangers and having conversations. Totally agree with you about the art of conversation being lost. Back when I had my pub, I spent most of the day talking to customers, but now working on my own, I miss it. Therefore, when I'm out on the river, waiting at a lock, I almost always strike up a conversation with another boater. Love the chinwags. They are really the highlight of my day. Well, nights for me. Thank you very much, Ed. It's been lovely to have had your boat and to have good old chinwag. We found the same, that actually, I said it's sometimes it's that thing, isn't it? You're all in the same club, whether you're on a boat or perhaps you all drive the same type of car. That you can stop and go, and you immediately can strike up a conversation because there's something that you all share. I mean, we all share the fact that we're human, but that's not always enough to, oh, look, I see you've got 2 ears. I've got 2 ears. But you can say, oh, I like your alloy wheels on that. Oh, yes, mate, I got them from a bloke with a blind leg. A blind leg? Yes, I'm not quite sure where that came from, but he had a blind leg. Anyway, they're lovely alloy wheels, and I wish I had more of them. Why, what would you do with more of them? And you just get into a conversation, not necessarily as extremely stupid as mine. Carl Chapman says, hi, Richard. On a motorbike, we filter to the front of a traffic jam. What I want to know is, what is the Queen wearing in her casket? For instance, I can't imagine her having a blue frock on. No, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I guess that's for the family to know and nobody else. You've almost got. I'm jittering now. Steve Roper. Get me out of this, please. He says, you've reminded me of a queuing poem that begins, is this bus queue for Q? And continues in a similar vein about a different queue for Kew, as in Kew Gardens, I suppose. Unfortunately, or not, I can't find any reference to it. So if anybody else knows the Kew Garden queue, then do let me know. Finally, Stars says, it's very British to stand in line and queue. National pastime, isn't it? Where would we be without a good queue? Yes, and I suppose that is a good way to end. We'll all queue up now to watch the next episode of the Chinwag, whatever that may be. Thank you very much for watching. And I want to know your battles, your personal battles, be they big and important battles or those sort of insignificant battles that you've had, as we remember the Battle of Britain on the 15th of September in 1940, and all those people, not just those plucky British and all the other nations that were helping us during the Second World War in the actual aeroplanes, the Spitfires and the Hurricanes, but the ground staff as well, and the whole support, the people in the munitions factories who were churning out the bullets to go in these things, all of them that helped make that event that we're able to keep this wonderful country that I live in afloat today, even though, it's changing dramatically over the last 80 odd years. 82 years ago. It's incredible. I want to know your battles. Let me know what they are, and we'll read out some of your comments in the next show. Till then, bye-bye.